The trial was a total sham, and I can only use that overused label of Kafkaesque. I mean, it was just completely insane. The judge acknowledges the central argument of my lawyers that the law didn't even apply to me. He actually even accepted that and then came out with, well, we have to consider the spirit of the law. You know, and this is from an illegal military regime that had undertaken a coup. So the idea that the spirit of the law was anything but a complete farce, you know, just defies description. So the details. So on one occasion, for instance, they held up a document that had confidential written on it. And they said to me, how did you get that? You shouldn't have had that. And I looked at it and I realised exactly what the document was. It was a document that I had written, had my name on it, and I said that back to the prosecutors in the court. I said, look, I had it because it was mine, I wrote it. And they said, well, it doesn't matter, you shouldn't have had it, and above all, you shouldn't have read it. And so at that moment, you know, I realised, not for the first, not for the last time, that I was way beyond the looking glass. So I was charged with a breach of the Official Secrets Act, and basically the accusation was that I had access to documents that I shouldn't have had, and that I had passed these on to American and British intelligence. That was the formal charge, but really it was that I was somehow a spy, somehow the string puller behind the scenes, and that Aung San Suu Kyi and all her ministers were just puppets, and I was sort of the puppet master, which is just so absurd. Anyone who knows trial together, and so the trial, as I mentioned earlier, lasted over a year. So I saw her every week for a year, and we got to talk a lot, obviously about the trial process itself and how absurd it was, and just the incredible injustice of it all, how proud she was of the Burmese people, but particularly young people, for even though their experience of democracy had been so brief, that they were out there on the streets defending it. She was so proud about that, so we spoke a lot about that. So her situation is slightly different to the average political prisoner, because she is, you know, prisoner number one by a long way. What they did up in the Naypyidaw jail was to build this sort of cabin which they put her in. But it's not at all luxurious. It's probably mud, and you know, the weather up there is awful. The food that she gets likewise is not at all good, not at all healthy would be my judgment. She has caught illnesses every now and then as well, and has a number of chronic conditions as well. So yeah, I worry a lot about her situation. That's right. So on the 17th of November 2022, day 650 of my captivity exactly, I was suddenly pardoned. Came right out of the blue. My wife and I had spoken on the phone the previous day, and we just reconciled to the idea that I was going to be there still for a long time, another Christmas would go by. So a real shock. Get back to Australia, and I give a number of comments to the media. Not too much, to be honest, and I didn't really talk too much about some of the terrible things, but this greatly upset the military regime in Myanmar, and in particular the leader of Myanmar's military junta, a guy called Min Aung Hlaing. And he suddenly announced, a few days before Christmas 2022, he suddenly said, my pardon is revoked, my arrest warrant reimposed, and that I was a fugitive at large, basically. So this was a real shock for me. So it means that my wings are clipped a little bit about where I travel around the world. I've got to be very careful at planning itineraries that don't land me in sort of rogue nations who are part of the awkward squad with Myanmar. Yeah, so it's been a bit disappointing, and I think psychological thing is sort of a bit of a hangover as well. I hasten to add, it hasn't dampened my enthusiasm nor sense of duty about speaking out on Myanmar, but it is something, unfortunately, that I just have to bear in mind.